Also new at 11, there are new developments in the search for a little boy who's been missing for 4 days now.
And Kyron Horman vanished from his Portland, Oregon elementary school on Friday. Since then, police have received more than 1,000 tips, but so far have come up empty. Have come up empty. Have come up empty.
On the morning of Thursday, June 4th, 2010, in Portland, Oregon, 7-year-old Kyron Horman was excitedly getting ready for his science fair at school. His project was on the red-eyed tree frog, and he couldn't wait to display it at the fair. He had diligently worked on the project, cutting and pasting interesting facts and colorful photos onto the large trifold poster board. Kyron and his stepmother, Terry, had dropped his project off at the school the day before, where students presented their projects to the class. Today was Family Day, where the family of students at Skyline Elementary School could come and see their children's and other students' science projects on display. Typically, Kyron would have taken the bus to school, but today his stepmother, Terry Horman, would drive him to school so she could see his completed science fair project and participate in Family Day. Terry, Kyron, and Kyron's 19-month-old half-sister, Kiara, set off for Skyline Elementary School. Terry, with Kiara in tow, walked Kyron to his classroom and snapped this photo of him with his science project, later posting it on Facebook. This was the last photo ever taken of precious Kyron, with his beautiful beaming smile and adorable glasses. He was so excited that it was almost summer break and so proud of his science project. Soon after this photo was taken, Kyron vanished. And to this day, 14 years later, no trace of him has ever been found. Join me as we dive into 14 years of twists and turns in this case. Someone knows what happened to Kyron. He needs to be found, and justice needs to be served to the monster or monsters that were behind his disappearance. Before we dive into the weeds of Kyron's case, let's take a minute to get to know this adorable little guy. Kyron Richard Horman was born September 9th, 2002, in Portland, Oregon, to Desiree Young and Kane Horman. His mother describes him as very shy and intelligent. She says Kyron would sit in a room of people and quietly listen to what they were saying, taking it all in. He would remain quiet and hardly noticed. But when Kyron was with people he knew and felt comfortable with, he could let his guard down and he'd show his goofy, fun side, especially with his older brother Quinn. Kyron was cute as a button with big blue eyes and the cutest little glasses. He had a big, beaming smile that radiated warmth and joy. A smile from Kyron would instantly uplift anyone lucky enough to see it. He loved chocolate peanut butter pie and forensic science. He was wearing a CSI t-shirt the day he disappeared. He had purchased the shirt on a school field trip the year before. Kyron wanted to be a detective when he grew up, and I think there is something ominous about that and the CSI t-shirt he was wearing that day in the photo. A photo that has been seen around the world. It's almost like he's telling the world, don't give up, keep looking for me, find the clues, they are there. Kyron's family and the world deserves answers as to what happened on that day in June of 2010. And if he is no longer with us, he needs to be returned to his family and peacefully laid to rest. 14 years ago, you lost your voice, sweet Kyron, but you and your story are not forgotten. We will be your voice and continue the fight for answers in your case.
I don't wanna close my eyes. It feels like I'm falling down, falling down. Oh, why won't they go away? Pictures of you in my head, the way you left broke my heart. I don't wanna close my eyes. It feels like I'm falling down, falling down. Oh, why won't they go away? Pictures of you in my head, the way you left broke my heart.
Before we go into the details of Kyron's disappearance, we have to talk about the dynamics of his family. Just like any movie or book, character development is necessary to fully understand the story. Although in Kyron's case, this is not a story, it is unfortunately real life. The people we are going to talk about are not made-up characters, but real people immersed in this tragic case. Even if you are familiar with this case, please stick around. In this video, we are going deep, and we'll be talking about background and details you may not have heard before. Okay, let's start with Kyron's mom, Desiree Young. Desiree has two sons, Quinn and Kyron, Kyron being her youngest. Desiree met Quinn's father, we'll call him G, in 1992 at work. They dated for a little less than a year and married in October of 1993 in Medford, Oregon. Desiree later became pregnant with twin boys, but at 20 weeks gestation, one of the boys' hearts stopped beating. Devastated by this, Desiree, along with her doctor, decided to carry him to term as to prevent the dangers of having to deliver the healthy fetus at 20 weeks. She was given hormones to prevent her body from trying to expel the twin fetus that was no longer viable, and was able to carry the pregnancy full term, giving birth to a healthy baby boy she named Quinn, calling him her miracle baby. 6 months after Quinn was born, Desiree separated from and divorced G, stating that he was possessive and controlling and she couldn't take living that way anymore. In April of 1996, Desiree met Kyron Horman briefly at the gym, later seeing him at a bar where he asked her on a date. They dated for about 4 years on and off before deciding to tie the knot July 15th of 2000. The wedding day didn't quite go as planned, as Desiree tried to make a run for it like Julia Roberts in Runaway Bride. Cold feet was an understatement for Desiree. Looking absolutely stunning in her wedding gown, she tried to bolt down the back staircase before she was stopped in her tracks by her soon-to-be mother-in-law, who scolded her, telling her not to cancel the wedding. Desiree gave in to her mother-in-law's demands and went through with the nuptials. About 2 years into her marriage to Kyron, Desiree started suspecting Kyron of cheating. But before she could look into Kyron's possible infidelity, she found out she was pregnant. Kyron wasn't happy about the pregnancy at first, telling Desiree he had no desire to be a dad. But a long talk with his mother seemed to change his mind, and he seemed more accepting of the idea. Desiree really wanted things to work with Kyron and create a loving, cohesive home for her new baby. She thought marriage counseling would give her and Kyron an opportunity to work through their issues before the baby came. In February of 2002, Kyron and Desiree started marriage counseling, continuing through July. Kyron went to the appointments, but seemed disinterested and even left a session midway through. I will never get it. Kyron has a beautiful, pregnant wife who wants to do whatever it takes to work on their marriage, a son on the way, and just craps all over it. He doesn't try, seems withdrawn and disinterested. That had to be so hard for Desiree. You're already so emotional during pregnancy, your body is going through so many changes, and to have your husband treat you this way just rips away the joy and excitement for an expectant mom. Instead, it brings emotional turmoil and sadness. Kyron and Desiree's marriage counseling abruptly ended after 6 months in July of 2002. And not because things got better and their love was stronger than ever. No, quite the opposite. Desiree received a call from her best friend confirming her suspicions all along. Kyron had a mistress and was cheating on pregnant Desiree. Whoever that friend was, that must have been hard to do. Tell a very pregnant woman her husband was cheating on her. But I admire that person for stepping up with the truth, because if you've ever been cheated on before, you know when you're suspecting it. It makes you crazy, wondering if you're overreacting and imagining things, especially if your partner is gaslighting you and calling you crazy. To me, that's almost worse than knowing the truth. That phone call sent Desiree looking for solid proof of Kane's infidelity. She went through his briefcase, finding something really fucked up, in my opinion. More fucked up than finding some lacy panties that aren't yours or a love note. Desiree found a quote-unquote list written by some chick named Terry Ecker. This list laid out steps Kane needed to take to leave Desiree and screw her over in the process. Now, before we talk about what is on this list, I want to interject here and say, I am not trying to pick on Kane. He made a lot of mistakes, but is also a victim who lost his son. So I'm not trying to be unempathetic, but I have to tell the backstory of Kane and Desiree's marriage in order to show how his mistress ended up involved in this case. Now let's talk about just a few of the items on this list from Kane's mistress, Terry. It first mentions that if Kane is going to survive leaving his wife, he needs to trust her. Can you imagine reading that as the wife? My stomach would drop through the floor, landing in China somewhere, not to mention throwing up in my mouth. Then it goes on to say he should first contact an attorney, and she gives him the name and phone number of an attorney she recommends. She tells Kane to ask said attorney about custody and open adoptions. Open adoptions? What the hell? I'm pretty sure Desiree has a huge say in what happens to her baby. That right there is a huge red flag to me. It's like his mistress is planting the seed right from the get-go that getting rid of the baby is an option by suggesting he look into open adoptions. That is some twisted evil stuff. And telling to me. She didn't want to have to deal with the new baby Kane's wife was about to give birth to. She wanted Kane to leave Desiree and not with a kid in tow. She also goes on to tell him if he's not 125% sure the baby is his, to get a DNA test done, and tells him to transfer all unnecessary money into an account in his parents' name and to take Desiree's name off all bank accounts, IRAs, 401ks, and any other benefits. She also goes on to give him addresses to some really nice apartment complexes in the area. She then ends it by saying, and also have a lot of sex with me, and then puts a little smiley face. Poor Desiree. I can only imagine her standing there 7 months pregnant at this point and finding this disgusting piece of trash in her husband's briefcase. The same day Desiree found the list, she made an appointment with a divorce lawyer and moved to the spare bedroom. According to Desiree, after the affair was brought to light and she moved into the spare bedroom, there was no remorse from Kane, only more disrespect, as he started sneaking Terry into his marital home with his pregnant wife sleeping in the same house. Desiree spent the remaining 2 months of her pregnancy crying herself to sleep, waiting for the day she could get out from under the toxic living situation she had found herself in. Fast forward to September 9th, Desiree gave birth to her second son, Kyron Richard Horman. He was absolutely perfect. Desiree's broken heart was now overcome with the most abundant love she had for her new son. Unfortunately for Desiree, there's no rest for the weary. As if Terry hadn't already infringed enough on Desiree's life, she couldn't even enjoy her new son for long at the hospital, as Terry decided it would be a great idea to show up and peek her head in the room, looking for Kane. I'm sure Terry was jealous as hell Kane was at the hospital with his wife and new baby. She couldn't help herself. She had to get in there and mark her territory. 2 months later, in December of 2002, Desiree was able to move out of the home she shared with Kane. As she packed up her things and put little Kyron in the car, she noticed a moving van down the street with the most god-awful sofa tied to the top. When she went back to Kane's soon after to pick up her cat, she noticed that same horrible sofa in the living room. If you're thinking what I'm thinking, you're correct. It was Terry's sofa. She was literally waiting outside the house with all of her things, chomping at the bit for Desiree to leave so she could stake her claim with Kane. Terry moved in with Kane, bringing her 16-year-old son and horrible sofa from a previous relationship with her. Before we move on, let's recap Kyron's blended family so far. We have his mother Desiree, who has now left his father Kane. We have his father Kane, who is now cohabitating with his mistress Terry, who brought along her 16-year-old son James. We have his half-brother Quinn and Quinn's father G, who remarried a woman we'll call L. They had a daughter together, so Quinn has his father, stepmother, and half-sister, along with half-brother Kyron and mom Desiree. The reason I'm mentioning Desiree's ex G's new family is they will be mentioned a few times in this video, so I thought I'd mention them now. And don't worry, I will periodically recap everyone involved to make sure we keep it all straight. Desiree is now on her own, living with both Quinn and baby Kyron, and finds herself struggling with her health. She always had some health issues, but it was getting worse. She was having serious issues with her kidneys. The doctors she was seeing in Oregon were really only treating her symptoms and not trying to figure out the cause of her kidney problems. According to Desiree, they just kept throwing pills and prescriptions at her, and she was getting worse, not better. It got so bad she ended up in and out of the hospital several times in 1 year. In August of 2004, Desiree was in Canada visiting friends and became ill during the visit. She saw a doctor there who told her getting to the root cause of her health issues is dire to save her kidneys. This was the first time any physician had been willing to take the time to dive deeper into what was really going on with her health. Desiree was determined to do whatever it took to get better. Her health issues were affecting every part of her life. She worried about her boys and especially wanted to get better for them. After much thought and planning, she thought it would be best to seek care in Canada with a physician willing to assist her in getting to the root cause of her kidney problems before her problems became irreversible. After several visits to Canadian doctors, Desiree thought it best to rent out her Portland condo and leave her job to spend some time in Canada getting treatment. She intended on taking Quinn and Kyron with her, but needed permission from Kane and G to take them out of the country. Both of them refused to sign the paperwork necessary to bring the boys with her to Canada. So according to Desiree, an agreement was reached with both fathers that they would keep the boys with them while she received medical treatment in Canada, returning them to Desiree when she returned to Oregon. Desiree was not happy about this, and according to her, the boys were not either, but she needed proper medical treatment, so hesitantly trusted the bio dads would keep their word. Desiree was able to get some answers to her issues. With the help of her doctors, it was discovered a medication she had long been prescribed was destroying her kidneys. This particular prescription medication was only supposed to be taken for a short period of time, but Desiree was never told that by any of her American doctors. In fact, they kept renewing her prescription. The chronic use of this medication was the root cause of her kidney issues. In fact, it was eventually deemed unsafe and banned in the US. Finally, some answers. Now, with help from her Canadian doctors, Desiree could begin to heal. Feeling hopeful about her health, Desiree was able to return to Oregon after receiving treatment in Canada for 2 months and get her life back. But upon her return, both Kane and G refused to return the boys to Desiree's full custody. That news was devastating to her. She had promised the boys the arrangement was temporary, and as soon as she returned, they would all be back together. Desiree was shocked by this. Both dads never had a problem with her having custody of the boys prior to this. Why the change all of a sudden? According to Desiree, she found out both dads had been talking while she was gone and decided together not to give the boys back. It saved them paying child support. She felt completely betrayed and taken advantage of while she was in a health crisis. But she wasn't going to give up so easy. She moved in with her parents in Medford, Oregon, and went back to work. Desiree had a lot of medical bills to pay off and knew it was going to cost her a lot of money to fight to get custody of her boys. For 2 years, Desiree lived with her parents and fought to get her boys back. During that time, Kane decided to marry Terry in Hawaii. Desiree couldn't help but think he did it to make himself look better in front of the judge, fighting for custody of Kyron. Whatever the reason, Kane would find out soon enough. Bringing Terry into his life was a not only huge mistake, but a dangerous one as well. The judge ultimately ruled in favor of the dads keeping custody of the boys and not uprooting them from Portland and the schools they were attending to move them to Medford. It's possible the judge viewed the boys living with remarried dads a more stable situation versus a single mom living with her parents trying to get on her feet from serious medical issues. Desiree was granted visitation of Quinn and Kyron and looked forward to every moment she was able to spend with her boys. She sometimes was able to spend extended periods of time with the boys during summer and take vacations with them as well. She worked hard to get back on her feet and eventually did, working her way up to a payroll manager and even fell in love again, marrying Tony Young, a Medford police detective. Tony loved fishing and had a fishing boat. Kyron loved going on the boat and fishing with Tony. As a matter of fact, before his disappearance, Kyron was so excited to spend some time with Desiree and Tony for the summer. They had plans to go camping and fishing at the lake, and he was really looking forward to it. Unfortunately, that camping trip would never come for precious Kyron. Something evil was lurking in the shadows, and everything would change in a blink of an eye. Now that we've covered the backstory of Kyron's family, which is really important in understanding his case, I need to veer for just a second to say that I really didn't want to mention Desiree's medical issues. Although she has put that information out publicly and they are mentioned in the book Boy Missing by Rebecca Morris, I still feel a bit uncomfortable about speaking on them. But her trip to Canada and why she went there plays a role in how the bio dads ended up with custody of the boys. Another reason is the mudslinging and misinformation thrown out there towards Desiree in regard to the custody arrangement, which absolutely baffles me. Just because she didn't have full custody of Kyron doesn't mean her love for him wasn't absolute and immense. Her custody arrangement has absolutely no bearing on his disappearance. If you've ever been in a bitter, contentious divorce, you can probably relate. Desiree had been through hell with her marriage to Kane, fought hard for her health, and then somehow found the strength to go up against the family court system and Kane, who seemingly had it all together with his new wife and great job, in hopes of getting Kyron back. And as if all of that wasn't enough, she gets the phone call all of us mothers dread and can't imagine hearing. Her baby is missing. To this day, 14 years later, she still has no idea where her son is. 14 years of no hugs from Kyron, no smiles, no birthday celebrations, and graduations to name a few. She has no place to go mourn him and lay flowers if he is no longer on this earth. It's a tragic story with no ending. I can't even begin to imagine her pain and the pain other families of missing children endure. Desiree was quickly cleared by law enforcement and has fully cooperated with their investigation into Kyron's disappearance. She has never stopped looking for her son and advocates for other families of missing children. With all that said, on this channel, we won't be putting any salt in a grieving mother's wounds. Instead, we will keep Kyron and his story alive and demand justice in his case. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of Kyron's case. And let me warn you, buckle up because it's about to get wild. It's the morning of June 4th, 2010. Kyron is excited but also anxious about the science fair. Today is the day families of the students can come and admire all of the projects on display at the school. Kyron puts on one of his favorite t-shirts. It's a CSI t-shirt he bought the year before on a field trip. Kyron, being a bit shy and quiet, always got a little nervous when having to speak in front of a group of people. His stepmother Terry was tending to his 19-month-old half-sister Kiara as he gathered his jacket and backpack. Yes, Kane and Terry eventually had a daughter together. Kyron's typical morning routine was to take the bus to school, but on this day there was a change of plans. Terry decided to drive him to school in Kane's pickup truck. I've heard different reasons she chose to do this. One was that she had planned to take Kyron's science fair diorama home with her that day after the science fair. Another was that she was bringing the diorama to the school for the science fair that day. Neither reason makes any sense. Kyron's diorama was already at the school. The students presented their projects to each other and the teachers the day before. As far as bringing it home with her, well, the projects were supposed to be left at the school after the science fair, so that doesn't make any sense either. Terry also had her own car she could have used if Kyron wasn't going to take the bus. So taking Kane's truck that morning is definitely a deviation in their normal morning routine. Now the three climbed into the truck and started the 3-mile trek to Skyline Elementary School. Kane, Terry, Kyron, and little Kiara lived on the outskirts of Portland. As you venture away from the bustling city center, you'll find lush forests, rolling hills, and serene rivers. The region is dotted with small towns and residential communities. They lived in a humble home painted blue with white trim, nestled among the many trees and greenery in the area. As they made their way to the school, I often wonder what was going through Kyron's mind. Was he wondering why he wasn't taking the bus? Why they were in Dad's truck? Did he feel like something was off that day? We'll probably never know. According to Terry, the trio arrived at Skyline Elementary School at approximately 8 a.m., parking in front of the school. Skyline Elementary is a charming school, clad in warm red brick that exudes a sense of timelessness and sturdiness. It stands as a welcoming beacon of learning and community, nestled in a tranquil, rural area. Large windows dot the red brick facade, allowing natural light to flood the classrooms. It sits amongst a tapestry of lush greenery and towering, majestic trees. It also sits on a hill above the road, with a staircase taking you to the entrance of the school. On this particular day, there would be about 300 family members and students flooding the parking lot and hallways of the school, gathered to attend the science fair. Terry states that soon after arriving at 8 a.m., they dropped off Kyron's backpack and coat and spoke briefly to his teacher, Mrs. Porter. At approximately 8:14 a.m., they went to the science fair, being seen by Gina Zimmerman, a PTA member. Terry then took the infamous photo of Kyron in front of his red-eyed tree frog project, and after that said hi to his first grade teacher, Mr. Macbeth. Terry then states she stood at the top of the stairs and watched Kyron turn and walk down the hallway to his classroom as she waved goodbye. According to Terry, she left the school with Kiara at approximately 8:45 a.m. and ran errands until 12:40 p.m. Then she arrived back home. Although Terry drove Kyron to school that morning, he was supposed to take the bus home as per his usual routine. At about 3:30, Terry and Kane headed to the bus stop to pick up Kyron. He wasn't on the bus. The bus driver allowed Terry to use his phone to call the school secretary, who noticed Kyron had been marked absent at about 10 a.m. that day. After finding out Kyron had been marked absent, Kane and Terry headed back to Skyline Elementary School, where the secretary called 911 at about 3:56 p.m. to report Kyron missing. Immediately after, she called Desiree to let her know her son was missing. At 3:59 p.m., the Portland Police and Multnomah County Sheriff's Office are dispatched. By 4:33 p.m., law enforcement begins searching the school and surrounding areas, along with the Horman home, for Kyron. At 7 p.m., the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office search and rescue are activated to assist in the search. As we know, 14 years later, Kyron was never found. His beaming smile, big blue eyes, and adorable glasses, never to be seen again. After receiving the phone call from Skyline Elementary that Kyron was missing, Desiree immediately left work to head to Portland. It's about a 4-hour drive from Medford. June 4th, 2010 was a Friday, and this was to be her weekend with Quinn. Desiree wanted to be able to hold one of her sons, so she told G she was still going to pick up Quinn. G was against it at first, but eventually gave in when Quinn stated he wanted to be with Desiree and help find Kyron. So Desiree, her husband Tony, and Quinn made the 4-hour trek to Portland. They ended up going to Cain's, and later that evening were interviewed at the school by law enforcement, and so the investigation began. Now, I could go on for hours about this case going back 14 years. There are a lot of rabbit holes you can find yourself falling into when it comes to this case, but in the interest of time, I am going to focus on the most glaring issues surrounding Kyron's disappearance. To dive even deeper into this case, please go to the description of this video, where I have links that will take you to pages, websites, and videos where you can get more information on Kyron's case. Now, on the morning Kyron vanished, the school was bustling with people. There were no sign-in sheets either, so law enforcement had no way of knowing who everyone was at the school that morning. That issue alone could lead one to believe that a stranger or an acquaintance abduction could be a possibility. But as law enforcement was interviewing Kyron's family, one person in particular became of interest to them because her timeline of events that day just wasn't lining up. That family member was Terry. So let's talk about the inconsistencies in her timeline. Terry said she left the school at 8:45 a.m. with Kiara and ran errands until returning home at 12:40 p.m. She says her first stop after leaving the school was to a Fred Meyer store at approximately 9 a.m. She says she went there to purchase Motrin for Kiara, whom she said had an ear infection and was fussy. Video surveillance shows her leaving the store at 9:12 a.m., so that stop could be verified. Terry states that particular Fred Meyer store did not have what she was looking for, so she then went to another Fred Meyer store in the area. She was seen there between 9:30 and 9:40 a.m. by an acquaintance from her gym, Andrea Lackey. Andrea stated she had an odd conversation with Terry and that Terry whipped out her phone and showed her the picture she snapped of Kyron at the science fair. It's unclear, or at least I couldn't find any information as to whether Terry purchased anything from this store, but she was seen there, so this stop can be verified as well. An interesting detail to keep in mind in regard to her errands that morning is that for some reason, Terry parked far away from each place of business she went to. Now, that could simply be because a big truck like Cain's could be difficult to park, or could it be because someone else was in the truck she didn't want to be picked up on surveillance camera? I'm not sure, but we'll talk more about this later in the video. So we've got 2 stops to Fred Meyer stores that Terry made that morning that can be verified. After that, things seem to get a bit dicey. The next stop Terry says she made was to Magic Dry Cleaners, where she picked up 2 shirts. There are conflicting reports on this. Some say the owner, Sherry, stated she saw Terry alone, and others say the owner doesn't remember if she saw Terry or not. If Terry was alone, where was baby Kiara? Did she leave her in the truck? Where did Terry park? Was it far away or close to the dry cleaners? Did Terry have a receipt from the dry cleaners? Those are the questions I have about her visit to the dry cleaners. Law enforcement may know the answers to those questions, but to this day, Kyron's case is still an open investigation, so not every detail they have has been released to the public. So it's unclear if her statement that she went to the dry cleaners can be verified. This puts us at 9:50 a.m., where Terry states she arrived at a Michael's craft store. It's unclear if she purchased anything or is seen on surveillance camera during this stop, so I don't know if this stop can be verified either. According to Desiree, when first interviewed by law enforcement, Terry didn't mention a stop at the Michaels craft store. She added that later when trying to fill in gaps in her timeline. After Terry says she left Michaels, there's an approximate 3-hour block of time unaccounted for. From 9:45 a.m. to 1 p.m., law enforcement had a hard time verifying where Terry was. What does Terry say about this? She states she was driving Kiara around, trying to get her to stop crying. Now look, I would do that with my daughter when she was a baby, but to me, and this is just my opinion, 3 hours seems excessive. I could see driving around for an hour maybe, but then why not take her home if she's not feeling well? What's also interesting is where Terry allegedly drove during those 3 hours. Counting the 2 Fred Meyer's stores, Terry drove a total of 68 miles after leaving Skyline Elementary, and that doesn't include her drive home. Now, if you drove the entire route without stopping, it would take you 2 hours, but she's missing approximately 3 hours. So did she stop somewhere along the way or make several stops? The only stop mentioned by law enforcement was on Newberry Road. Kane's truck was allegedly spotted, pulled over, and when questioned about this, Terry said she may have pulled over to change a diaper, but couldn't recall what she did with the diaper. Something I find interesting about her long drive is many of the areas have various elevations, which could actually aggravate an ear infection, as the pressure changes in the ears could be quite painful, especially to a child with ear pain. This long drive and the roads that she traversed is definitely another deviation in Terry's normal routine. According to Terry, after all that driving a little one around with an ear infection, she thought it would be a good idea to hit the gym. According to her, she arrived at 24 Hour Fitness at 11:39 a.m. and left at 12:20 p.m. The gym clocked her in at 12:20 p.m., not 11:39 a.m., and shows her leaving at 12:42 p.m. That means she was only at the gym for 20 minutes. Terry put Kiara in the gym's daycare, and according to witnesses, she didn't work out. She spent the 20 minutes she was there talking to someone she would say hi to from time to time, but never had a lengthy conversation with before. Terry also whipped out her phone again and showed this woman a picture of Kyron at the science fair as well. A witness also stated that Terry allegedly said that parenting was very demanding and how she had to cancel her own plans to take Kyron to the science fair. She also showed a witness at the gym a gash below her knee. Terry stated the injury came from dropping a weight on her leg, but the witness stated it didn't look like it came from a weight at all, that a weight would most likely bruise her leg, not create a gash, and also stated the injury looked more like something that would have happened outdoors. I have so many questions here. Why would you drive a sick child around for hours to allegedly calm her, only to throw her into your gym's daycare? How on earth would that seem like a good idea? Why go to the gym at all if you're not going to work out, only chat with someone you allegedly didn't know and had only said hi to in passing? Why would you show them a gash on your leg, stating the injury came from a weight, yet you weren't working out? Where did the injury come from? Was it from that day or a previous injury? And above all, why lie and say you were there an hour when you were only there 20 minutes? I can see being off by maybe 10-15 minutes, but a 40-minute discrepancy? Why? After leaving the gym, Terry allegedly returns home. At 1:21 p.m., she posts the infamous photo of Kyron at the science fair to her Facebook page. She then emails Desiree to tell her she posted the photo. At 1:26 p.m., she emails Desiree again talking about a school shirt order and summer plans. This was odd because according to Desiree, they had a system in place for exchanging photos of Kyron. During custody exchanges, a flash drive containing photos of Kyron would be left in his backpack. According to Desiree, these emails were not normal and very odd. As the investigation went on, there were more discrepancies in Terry's statement from the day Kyron went missing. And let me interject here and say that I will recap all of the red flags and holes in Terry's story at the end of this video. So hang tight, there's more to go through before I get there. As the investigation went on, law enforcement found that Terry's recollection of what happened at the school the morning Kyron disappeared came into question. According to her, she left the school at 8:45 a.m., waving goodbye to Kyron as he went down the hallway towards his classroom. Per Kyron's regular bus driver, who was in the parking lot of the school that morning, and 3 of Kyron's friends, along with one of the children's parents, they allegedly saw Kyron leaving the school with Terry and Kiara. The bus driver stating he saw the trio walking through the parking lot at 8:50 a.m., headed towards the main road that runs in front of the school. Now, there was one student that contradicted this by stating he saw Kyron after 8:45 a.m. But when you have 4 others, including 2 adults, saying they saw Kyron leaving with Terry, those statements seem to be a little bit more credible. Not to mention law enforcement came out publicly stating Terry was the last person to see Kyron alive that morning. The student saying he saw Kyron after 8:45 could have easily had the time mixed up. Now here is where Terry had allegedly parked Kane's truck that morning. Although there were many people at the school that morning, witnesses have stated where she parked was odd, much farther away than necessary. It's also important to note that where she parked would make it difficult to see the truck from the school because the truck would sit below the school, hidden by this hill. Now you're probably wondering why Kyron was marked absent at 10 a.m. and no one was notified of his absence. According to his teacher, Terry had informed her a few days prior that Kyron had a doctor's appointment that day. Some of his friends knew of the doctor's appointment as well, so Mrs. Porter allegedly remembered this and possibly wasn't concerned, assuming he left after the science fair to go to his doctor's appointment. What's odd is his backpack and jacket were left at school. I find it concerning, though, that Miss Porter didn't double check to see if Kyron was signed out for the doctor's appointment. Had she checked that and found no one had signed him out, law enforcement could have been notified sooner he was missing, and maybe, just maybe, things may have turned out differently in this case. When asked by law enforcement about Kyron's doctor's appointment, Terry stated that she screwed up the dates, and it was actually scheduled for the week after. I couldn't find if there was ever confirmation of a doctor's appointment for Kyron. Did Terry mention a doctor's appointment to Kyron's teacher in an effort to not cause suspicion right away if Kyron went missing from the school that morning? I don't know, and it could be nothing, but it's just another detail I find quite odd. As the investigation continued, Desiree, Tony, Kane, and Terry were all asked to take polygraph tests. Everyone passed except Terry. She was called back 3 times, failing 2 tests and walking out on one of them. Kane had been supporting Terry, not wanting to believe she could have had anything to do with Kyron's disappearance, but not for long. In late June, a literal brick hit him in the face when he was told by law enforcement 5 months prior to Kyron's disappearance, Terry had tried to hire someone to kill him. He abruptly grabbed Kiara and left the home he shared with Terry and immediately filed for a restraining order against her. As the story goes, 2 years prior to Kyron's disappearance in 2008, Terry hired a landscaper named Rodolfo Sanchez. What's weird about this is Kane never knew she hired this guy. Why would you hide hiring a landscaper from your husband? What was going on with the landscaper that it had to be a secret? Wouldn't Kane notice the yard looking different, or was there any landscaping being done at all? Fast forward to January or February of 2010. Terry invited Rodolfo to meet at a restaurant. She brought Kiara along with her, which is mind-blowing because allegedly, while at the restaurant, Terry told Rodolfo that Kane was abusive and asked him to help her find someone to get rid of him. She told him Kane's schedule and said Kane always carried $10,000 in cash with him and a computer. She said it would be easy to make it look like a mugging. Rodolfo turned her down at the time. After Kyron went missing, he gave a deposition to law enforcement about this, stating concern for Kiara. Come to find out, this wasn't the first time Terry had tried to hire someone to off one of her partners. Allegedly, a number of years prior, a boyfriend of Terry's reported that they were eating Chinese food at the park one day. A random guy runs up to the couple with a gun. Terry looks at her boyfriend and says, "He's here for you." That must have spooked the guy with the gun when she said that, because he turned around and ran away. Terry denies both of these murder-for-hire plots. She says the landscaper was retaliating because she refused his advances, and completely denies what happened at the park with her boyfriend. Another concerning detail is the day Kyron vanished, Terry and Kane took his backpack and jacket home, and that evening Terry washed both. Why would you do that? There could be possible evidence on or in the jacket and backpack. It just doesn't make any sense. School was almost out. Why wash the backpack? Kyron's jacket would have had his scent on it. Why would you choose to wash these things the same day he went missing? Fast forward to August, things really start heating up in the investigation. Law enforcement sends out a flyer to the public with photos of Kane's truck, photos of Terry, and photos of Terry's friend Dee Dee. We'll talk more about Dee Dee in a minute, but here's what the flyer says. On Friday, June 4th, 2010, Skyline School student Kyron Horman went missing. As part of the investigation, residents in the area are being asked if they noticed any of these people or the vehicle below on that day between 9:45 a.m. and 1 p.m. Please take a few moments to review the photos below and complete the attached flyer. Every resident is asked to fill out a form individually. If you are not completing this form in the presence of the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, please return the stamped envelope included. Thank you for your time and cooperation. The flyer makes it pretty obvious Terry is at least a person of interest in the case, if not a prime suspect at this point. Now let's talk about Dee Dee. Dee Dee, a close friend of Terry's whom she met at the gym, just so happened to abruptly go missing from her place of work, a lavender farm not far from Kyron's school, about the same time Terry was unaccounted for. Dee Dee went missing from approximately 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the day Kyron went missing. Once coworkers noticed she was missing, which was completely unlike her, they stated they tried calling her on her cell phone numerous times and she couldn't be reached. What's even more baffling is Dee Dee left her truck and cell phone behind. Where did she go without her truck and cell phone? Did someone pick her up? Why would she leave without telling anyone? Allegedly, Dee Dee and Terry were seen together during the time in question, blocking someone's driveway on Germantown Road, a very rural area. They were seen loading items from one truck to another. The witness said they stuck out like a sore thumb. It was very odd for the area. Law enforcement later did a search in the area, but it's unclear if they found any evidence relating to Kyron's disappearance, as the case is still open and not all evidence, if any, would be released to the public. Law enforcement searched the farm Dee Dee had been working at, along with her condo. It's unclear if they uncovered any evidence from either of those searches. After Kane left Terry, Dee Dee came and stayed with her for 11 days. During that time, the two used burner phones to communicate. They were afraid the house was bugged, so would only use small talk inside, but they would use their burner phones and go outside to communicate about anything they didn't want law enforcement to hear. It was also found that Dee Dee and Terry had been sexting one of Kane's friends from high school who had helped in the search for Kyron. It was found that the burner phones were purchased with cash at a Lloyd's store by a mutual friend of Terry and Dee Dee's who used a fake name. Now, Dee Dee didn't cooperate much with law enforcement. She did lead them to where the burner phones were, but that was about it. During a deposition, she pled the fifth 143 times. A huge mistake made, in my opinion, was Dee Dee was given full immunity in this case. If it's proven she had something to do with Kyron's disappearance, she could never be prosecuted. In my opinion, prosecutors may have done this thinking they could get her to tell them what she knows, if anything, to give them more ammo to go after Terry. But the only thing Dee Dee gave up is where the burner phones were, and after that, nothing. They should have given her conditional immunity But nope, they shot themselves in the foot, giving her full immunity in this case. Dee Dee and Terry lawyered up when pressure from law enforcement started coming down on them. And from what I understand, the two haven't been in communication for years. In August of 2010, a grand jury convened and heard evidence in the case without reaching an indictment. Sometime after Kane was granted the restraining order against Terry, she made an attempt to abduct Kiara, showing up to the gym and asking if she was in the daycare. When the employee said no, she allegedly stated, "Well, if she was, I would have taken her." Terry was to have no contact with Kiara unless certain stipulations laid out by the court were met. One of them was a full mental evaluation. Terry refused to cooperate, choosing self-preservation over her daughter. Kane went back to court after the attempted abduction to have Terry held in contempt for violating the restraining order. Because Terry did not cooperate with any of the stipulations from the court, she has had no contact with Kiara to this day. A few interesting details were divulged by Kane after he found out about the murder-for-hire plot against him. Kane stated that after Kiara was born, Terry started behaving differently, and he was concerned she was suffering from postpartum depression. He said she started drinking behind his back, and when he found out about it, she said it helped her sleep. He was concerned because in 2005, she was arrested for driving under the influence, where she was put on 12 months probation and had her license suspended. He said Terry was becoming more irritable and started losing her patience with James, Kyron, and the baby. She sent James away in 2009 to live with her parents, stating they just weren't getting along. Leading up to his disappearance, Kyron had been wetting the bed, which is an indicator of stress and anxiety. Kane said there was no room for error from Kyron when it came to Terry. He said that was the reason for many of their fights. He felt Terry was being too hard on Kyron. Kane also stated he and Terry were fighting a lot leading up to Kyron's disappearance, and the night before Kyron went missing, they fought until 3 a.m. It seems the Horman household was in turmoil leading up to Kyron's disappearance, and Kyron was suffering.
From what I understand, their house was very divided at the time when Kyron went missing. Kyron was struggling. He didn't want to go back. He would cry and cry and cry and didn't want me to take him back. We realized that he was wetting the bed. I didn't know why that was. He couldn't articulate what the problem was to me, but there was problems, clearly. And it finally came to a head where I wasn't going to take him back. I couldn't do it. And I want to protect my child. There's clearly something going on. And I called Kane and I told him I wasn't bringing him home. And Kane said, "Yes, you are. That this is not an option." Terry was calling me sometimes in the middle of the night in that year. She wanted me to take Kyron. She asked me on several occasions. One day I was running errands and she called and I could hear Kyron in the background crying. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "I want you to come and get him." Okay, I'm getting in the car. I'm coming. And I get in the car and I'm calling Kane at the same time. Said, "Something's going on. I'm going to get Kyron." "No, you're not. That's not an option." And I'll be honest, Kane probably didn't handle it the right way. Kyron was clearly having issues. And then he was ignoring all of it.
My heart just breaks for this little guy. Who knows what he was going through behind closed doors with Terry when Kane was at work. As time went on with no resolve in Kyron's case, Terry got out of Dodge and moved away from Portland to California. I'm sure she couldn't take the heat and wanted to go where people may not recognize her. Even though she moved away from Portland, she didn't escape trouble. In 2016, her boyfriend at the time filed a restraining order against her. He stated he feared for his life, stemming from an incident in regard to Kyron's case. When he met Terry, he didn't know anything about Kyron. When he heard about Kyron and put two and two together, he asked Terry about it. She said she was the victim of corrupt law enforcement in Oregon and bursted into anger, grabbing a knife from the kitchen and holding it into his face, threatening him if he were to ever talk to law enforcement. He told the judge he didn't know what she was capable of doing. The judge granted him a 2-year restraining order. That same year, Terry was arrested 3 times, one for car theft, another for gun theft, and one for domestic violence. Terry also tried to legally change her name twice to rid herself of the Horman last name. The first time, the judge denied her request. Stacy from the Kyron Horman's World Soldiers Facebook page, along with others, testified at this hearing, voicing their concerns about the name change. The second time, Terry withdrew her request when she found out Stacy had gotten a hotel room in the area and was planning to attend her second name change hearing. I highly suggest checking out the Kyron Horman's World Soldiers Facebook page. It is a wealth of information on this case. I will link it in the description of this video. Terry eventually succeeded at a name change by remarrying for the 4th time. Her last name is currently Vasquez. Allegedly, her current husband became a U.S. citizen by marrying her. Although law enforcement had Terry and Dee Dee in their sights, neither has ever been arrested in connection with Kyron's disappearance, and both vehemently deny any involvement. If Terry is innocent, then what else could have happened to Kyron? Did he wander out of the school and get lost, never to be found again? According to Kyron's family and those that know him best, they say he wasn't the type of child to wander off. I believe that's highly unlikely myself. As such a little guy, I don't think he would have gotten very far. Law enforcement did such a thorough search of the school and surrounding areas, I believe they would have found him. There were a lot of people at the school that day. Did a stranger abduct him? According to those that know him best, Kyron was very shy and would not have walked off with someone he didn't know and trust. If a stranger tried to abduct him, chances are he would have been scared, upset. Someone would have seen something out of the ordinary. His friends probably would have noticed. Someone would have seen him being taken against his will at some point, in my opinion. Could any of these 2 scenarios have happened? Yes, of course it's possible. But law enforcement seemed to think otherwise, and Kyron's parents have publicly stated they believe Terry is involved in Kyron's disappearance. Let's talk about child abduction statistics for a moment and see what the Crimes Against Children Research Center and the U.S. Department of Justice have to say. According to David Finkelhor, the director of the Crimes Against Children Research Center at the University of New Hampshire, children kidnapped by complete strangers or people they only barely know only make up 0.01% of all children who are missing. He wrote this in the Washington Post. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 797,500 children younger than 18 were reported missing in a 1-year period of time. That results in an average of 2,185 children being reported missing each day. A little over 200,000 of them were victims of family abductions. Over 58,000 were the victims of non-family abductions, and 115 were the victims of stereotypical kidnapping. The stats seem to show that most child abductions are committed by someone the child knows, which brings me back to the quote at the beginning of this video. Now let's go over the glaring red flags in this case, indicating it's possible Terry could have been involved. If you take one of these red flags by itself, it could mean nothing and possibly be explained away. But when you put them all together, it's beyond concerning in my opinion.
I will say that they have gone out of their way to exhaust every other angle and suspect out there. They have ruled out every parent that was in the school that day, every registered sex offender in the area, every house that neighbors up to the school. They have ruled out every single possible other person except one.
Let's summarize some of the glaring red flags surrounding Terry and Dee Dee in Kyron's disappearance. There were deviations in her normal routine. She was driving Kane's truck that particular day when she has her own car she could have taken. There was no reason whatsoever she needed to drive that truck. Her only cargo was Kyron and Kiara. Parking that truck in the weeds, so to speak, in front of the school where it would be hard to be seen from the school. 4 witnesses seeing Kyron leave the school with Terry. Telling Kyron's teacher he had a doctor's appointment that day as to not cause concern if he was gone, when there was no doctor's appointment that day. Driving almost 70 miles through rural areas with varying elevations to allegedly calm a toddler with an ear infection. That just doesn't make sense when varying elevations would aggravate someone suffering with ear pain. Terry had 3 hours of time unaccounted for the day Kyron went missing, along with her friend Dee Dee going missing from work during the same time frame. Coworkers stating it was completely unlike her, leaving her vehicle and cell phone behind. Going to the gym for 20 minutes to not work out, only to put a sick toddler in the daycare, and lying about the time she arrived and left by 40 minutes. Why is she showing someone she doesn't really know a gash on her leg and Kyron's photo at the science fair? Her comments to an acquaintance about how taking Kyron to the science fair caused her to have to change her plans for that day. Washing Kyron's backpack and jacket only hours after he goes missing. Failing polygraph tests. Using burner phones to communicate with Dee Dee. Why? What is there to hide? Kane stating Terry was drinking behind his back, acting differently, and losing patience with Kyron and her children. She literally tried to find someone to murder Kyron's father months before Kyron vanished, which says to me taking out his son wouldn't be too far-fetched. Another murder-for-hire plot years earlier on her boyfriend. At least 2 restraining orders against her from partners, one stating she brandished a knife and threatened her boyfriend if he ever spoke to law enforcement regarding Kyron. Violating her restraining order from Kane, trying to abduct Kiara. Being arrested for DV. Arrest for gun theft and car theft. I'm sure there are more red flags, but this is quite the list already. Terry denies being involved in Kyron's disappearance, so what does she think happened to him? According to Terry, she thinks someone came into the school and took Kyron. Now, Dr. Phil had Desiree and Kane on his show in one episode and Terry in another. I will link those in the description of this video. I highly suggest watching, especially if you want to hear Terry speak on this. I wanted to play some clips, but I don't want to risk a copyright strike, so make sure to go check those episodes out. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, Terry is a walking red flag in Kyron's disappearance. Her marriage to Kane was in shambles. She allegedly wanted him dead. She has violent tendencies, it seems, as revealed by a DV arrest and a few restraining orders against her. She was allegedly hard on Kyron and possibly resentful of having to care for him. What I see is a woman who was resentful and obviously loathed her husband so much she tried to hire someone to murder him. When that didn't work out, what a better way to get back at him than to take out his only son? I could totally be wrong, but there are just so many red flags I'm willing to go out on a limb and state my opinion here. I have so many questions. Terry was the last person to see Kyron alive. She called him her son, yet has never, not once, helped search for him. After walking out on her last polygraph, she stopped speaking about the case, stating her attorney won't let her speak on it. Why do Terry and Dee Dee, for that matter, need defense attorneys, yet Desiree, Tony, and Kane do not? If you called Kyron your son, why wouldn't you do anything it took to help find him? Why wouldn't you be an open book about the day he went missing? Why have Terry and Dee Dee not been cleared in this case? The court of public opinion may not be able to convict anyone in the court of law, but the public doesn't always get enough credit. People aren't stupid and can sense when something is off about a case or people involved. According to the law, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but the public has every right to ask questions about a walking red flag in the case of a missing, innocent 7-year-old boy. All of this could easily be cleared up if Terry and Dee Dee cooperated with the investigation. Myself and many others have wondered, if Terry is involved in Kyron's disappearance, why is she still walking free? According to sources close to the case, the current Multnomah County DA, Mike Schmidt, is not willing to pursue Kyron's case. No body cases can be difficult to prosecute. Casey Anthony is a good example, but it has been done before. Most no-body cases have some sort of blood evidence, a confession, or someone with first-hand knowledge who testifies against the defendant. Although there are some where strictly circumstantial evidence resulted in a conviction. I'll link a Wikipedia page in the description that has no body murder cases that resulted in convictions if you want to take a look into that. In Kyron's case, law enforcement did find his DNA in the back of Kane's truck, but we don't know how much. We just don't know all of the evidence they have since this is an open investigation. But there is hope. Nathan Vasquez defeated Mike Schmidt in an election held this year back in May of 2024. He met with Desiree and is willing to pursue Kyron's case. I personally think that is exactly what is needed for little Kyron. Fresh eyes taking a look at the case, people with strength and vigor, willing to go all in and fight for a resolution. I pray this for all involved in this case. It's just gone on long enough and needs to be solved. Kyron needs to be found and returned to his parents. I can't bear to think of him left out there somewhere for all of these years, or what he may have had to endure on that day, most likely by someone he trusted to keep him safe.
I actually thought of all the evil in the world first, and they asked, if I knew where Kyron was. And I said, God, I wish I knew. I would give anything to go back in time and to pull him out of that moment and protect him and be there. And I can't undo that. And I can't undo that. Undo that. Undo that.
My keyboard is stained with tears over Kyron's story. I've had to walk away from making this video several times to pull myself together. But that is nothing in comparison to what Desiree has had to endure for 14 years. And that is what kept me coming back to push through making this video.
"12 years to not have your son who is a piece of you. It's hard to function every day. Those are the things that make it so hard. Life keeps going. And I'm stuck at June 4th, 2010. I haven't moved past that. Kyron's still 7 to me.
Lying awake with the sound of an emptiness you left behind. Trying to sleep, but the silence is haunting this room every night. Oh, I wish the sun would rise and see the clouds pass by. I didn't want to say goodbye to you, but you're gone. I don't wanna close my eyes. It feels like I'm falling down, falling down. Oh, why won't they go away? Pictures of you in my head. t-shirt you left, but it no longer smells like you do. I can't stand to feel this way. My body's screaming out your name. I didn't want to say goodbye to you, but you're gone. I don't wanna close my eyes. It feels like I'm falling.